Over time, there have been so many extraordinary things said about women. In her famous 1980s song, Cyndi Lauper sang, and what about the fantastic Roy Orbison hit?
Pretty woman, walking down the street, pretty woman, the kind of like me.
But equally interesting, what do Shakespeare and Jane Austen have to say about women within Much Ado About Nothing and Pride and Prejudice? Well, stay tuned because you're watching Schofield on Shakespeare. Due in part to their recognition of the vital importance of attracting a husband for their own future happiness and well-being, some female characters in Pride and Prejudice come across as rather silly, pretty and inane. Miss Bingley is one of these. Early in the novel, it is clear that she loves the idea of being wed to her brother's friend, the fine, tall, handsome Mr. Darcy, who has a substantial fortune of £10,000 a year and a large estate in Derbyshire. She therefore tries to flatter and engage him in conversation whenever she can. In chapter 10 of the first volume, the intense, intelligent, quiet Darcy is writing a letter to his sister. Miss Bingley sees this blatantly solitary endeavour as an opportunity to make polite, irritating chit-chat. She cries enthusiastically, "How delighted Miss Darcy will be to receive such a letter!" To which the narrator informs us that he made no answer. Darcy's lack of response, however, does not put Miss Bingley off at all, and she continues with her non-stop wittering. She marvels, "How many letters you must have occasion to write in the course of the year. Letters of business too. How odious I should think them." Darcy's response is curt. It is fortunate, then, that they fall to my lot instead of to yours. Miss Bingley's use of exclamation marks reveals her enthusiasm for talking and attempting to engage Mr. Darcy, even about something so mundane and personal as letter writing, whilst the adjective odious gives a hint of her utter unsuitability for him. She detests the idea of having to do a great deal of writing, yet just a few chapters previously, Mr. Darcy has indicated that the ideal woman should work towards the improvement of her mind by extensive reading. Both reading and writing require solitary self-discipline, something Miss Bingley is clearly incapable of, and this provides the reader with an early indication that her dream wedding will never take place. So Miss Bingley's life and personality is almost exclusively geared up towards attracting a wealthy husband. She behaves in a simpering way that she believes this type of man will find attractive, and in the process comes across as mildly irritating and extraordinarily inane, especially to the modern reader. But there are other important female characters who reveal the disadvantages of a society in which women were denied the same opportunities as men. Mrs. Bennett is one such person. As a younger woman, she would have been similar to Miss Bingley, attractive, appearing to hang on every man's words, and indeed, Austen says that Mr. Bennett was captivated by her youth and beauty, and that appearance of good humour which youth and beauty generally give. The past participle captivated shows how Mr. Bennett was utterly charmed by his soon-to-be wife's appearance, so much so that it temporarily blinded his senses and judgments. However, Austen shows that a system which moulds women solely to please men, a system which doesn't encourage women to think too much or to have independent minds, can produce unhappy, unsatisfactory relationships. Mr. Bennett soon realises that intellectually his wife has absolutely nothing to offer him other than nags and frivolous trivialities. The narrator reveals that he now realises he married a woman whose weak understanding and illiberal mind had very early in their marriage put an end to all real affection for her. Respect, esteem and confidence had vanished forever. Phrases such as put an end to and vanish forever indicate a startling finality to Mr. Bennet's judgment about his wife. There is no possibility whatsoever of him redeveloping any future respect or affection for his wife, and hence reveals the dangers of both marrying too hastily and the evils of a society which discouraged women from doing much more than having a thorough knowledge of music, singing, dancing, and the modern languages, and a certain something in her air and a manner of walking, the tone of her voice, her address and expressions. But not all women in Pride and Prejudice are simpering and silly, frivolous and floppy-eared, whereas Miss Bingley can only flirt, bitch, and ask tedious questions. Eliza Bennet uses something else in her conversations with men, her brain. In the same chapter, when Miss Bingley is unable to restrain herself from interrupting Darcy as he writes to his sister, Eliza engineers an intellectual debate about the extent to which friendship should influence behaviour and actions. Eliza clearly believes in loyalty and respect for a trusted confidant. She questions Darcy, but in general and ordinary cases between friend and friends, where one of them is desired by the other to change a resolution of no very great moment, should you think ill of that person for complying with the desire without waiting to be argued into it? The contrast between the length and complexity of Eliza's question and Miss Bingley's early utterances is enormous. Eliza has the intelligence and self-belief to frame and clarify her words within specific conditions. Her view is only valid when the cases are general and ordinary and the decision is relatively unimportant, a resolution of no very great moment. This ability to specify exactly what she means and debate intellectual issues on an equal footing with men elevates Eliza above the average early 19th century woman and ultimately shows her suitability for an intelligent, thinking man such as Darcy. For Darcy is not remotely put off by Eliza's challenging, probing question, but responds in the same vein. He returns Eliza's question with a clarifying question of his own. Will it not be advisable, before we proceed on this subject, to arrange with rather more precision the degree of importance which is to appertain to this request, as well as the degree of intimacy subsisting between the parties? So Eliza gives conditions to her view, which Darcy in turn suggests needs even greater clarification to allow them to come to a sensible conclusion as to what extent one's closeness to a friend should result in unquestioning adherence to their suggestions. And the happy ending to Pride and Prejudice shows that women who have the courage to defy perceived expectations, who are brave enough not to incessantly flatter men, are the happiest. Miss Bingley may well be wealthier and with less embarrassing family members, but it is Eliza who ends up marrying Darcy, not her. In the penultimate chapter to the book, Darcy confirms that he admired Eliza for the liveliness of her mind, the ability for her to say something instinctive rather than expected, something intelligent rather than contrived. Eliza develops the theme further and tells her husband to be, "The fact is that you are sick of civility, of deference, of officious attention. You are disgusted with the women who are always speaking and looking and thinking for your approbation alone. I roused and interested you because I was so unlike them." The adjective disgusted is a strong one, but it shows how passive female flatterers can provoke extreme dislike and irritation, whilst even mere politeness, mere civility, can become insufferable to someone as strong-willed and intellectually driven as Darcy. Austen shows the romantic value of women who are brave enough to show independence of mind and will. Remember, Eliza turns down Mr. Darcy's first marriage proposal, something he and numerous others would have found initially inconceivable. Shakespeare in Much Ado About Nothing also shows the value of an independent, intelligent woman in the shape of Beatrice. She is feisty, fiery, and uses her wit mercilessly against men, whereas Eliza may defy convention by taking on the men in equal discussions and debates. Beatrice goes one step further and takes great enjoyment in wielding clever, deft insults, notoriously when addressing Benedict. They come head to head in Act 1, Scene 1 of the play, with Beatrice most pleased that her adversary has returned safely from battle to continue their verbal sword fights. Benedict greets her with the nickname Lady Disdain, suggesting that Beatrice is almost aristocratic in her ability to look down on others, before asking whether she is yet living. However, Beatrice twists this question to respond with a question of her own. Is it possible disdain should die? Why, she hath such meat food to feed it as Signor Benedict. Courtesy itself must convert to disdain if you come in her presence. The word play may be clever, but the meaning is clear. Signor Benedict is so extraordinarily in need of being looked down upon and disliked that he would even corrupt and destroy the abstract concept of courtesy, i.e. politeness and civility. Anyone coming near Benedict, according to Beatrice, even the politest and most courteous, cannot help but show their contempt. These are strong words, and even accepting the comic value of exaggeration, make Eliza seem positively restrained and mouse-like in comparison. Very early on in Pride and Prejudice, she develops an extreme dislike towards Mr. Darcy. But even when given misleading information about him from the attractive Mr. Wickham, the strongest sentiments she comes out with refer to his abominable pride, and the idea that to find him agreeable would be an evil. Beatrice, by contrast, positively revels in insults, scarcely hidden behind skillful puns and wordplay. In Act 1, Scene 3, she abandons even these and takes advantage of the masked ball to pretend she doesn't realise she is talking to Benedict. When asked to describe him, she replies gaily, "Why, he is the Prince's jester, a very dull fool. Only his gift is in devising impossible slanders. None but libertines delight in him." Benedict is most certainly offended by this, as seen by his indignant soliloquy, "The Prince's fool? I am not so reputed. I'll be revenged." And his subsequent conversation with Don Pedro. "She told me, not thinking I had been myself, that I was the Prince's jester." Beatrice's description strikes a dagger into the heart of Benedict's dignity. He is a man of high social standing, as shown in his close association with the Prince Don Pedro, and to suggest his status is only just above that of a servant would have been an enormous insult. So Shakespeare presents Beatrice as a feisty, sparky woman who is likely to provide excellent entertainment for her audience. But it is important to remember that her parentless position gives her more freedom to entertain than her cousin Hero. For whilst Hero shows that one woman can be independent and intelligent, he also shows how other women can be totally dominated by the respective men in their lives. Back in Act 2, Scene 1, Hero's marriage to Count Claudio is confirmed. Claudio's happiness is revealed when he cries, "Silence is the perfectest herald of joy. I were but little happy if I could say how much. Lady, as you are mine, I am yours." A herald was a person who made important announcements, and so Claudio is suggesting his comparative reticence indicates his inner delight and happiness. It is just that in this formal situation at least, he feels unable to put all his feelings into words. What about Hero? What is her reaction on hearing that she will very soon become a married woman? Well, she says nothing. And it is perhaps fortunate that in her case at least, to paraphrase King Lear, nothing does not become of nothing. In fact, Shakespeare fails to include any loving or intimate conversations in the play between Hero and Claudio, making the former seem rather uninteresting and the latter seemingly interested in appearance above personality. Can the world buy such a jewel? The only time the audience does get a glimpse into Hero's personality is when she is alone with other women. Is Shakespeare suggesting that men so dominate the Elizabethan landscape that only the feistiest, bravest and most intelligent women can get a word in edgeways, relegating lesser females to embrace women-only conversations? Because when Hero is alone with other women, she is confident, witty, and shows she does have a personality after all.